Hey, what's going on? It's Ken Spence in the building. Just wanted to holler at y'all for a little bit, talk for a little bit, just talk. And today's subject, we're actually going to talk about gun rights, the Second Amendment, and gun control. We're going to talk about all those things today. I think something that really needs to happen. I think a lot of us are more multifaceted than we're willing to admit at times, and we don't stand firm with one group or another in terms of how we feel with something. So I figured I wanted to speak to this issue from the perspective of a person that grew up in what's considered an urban center. Grew up, born, raised in Philadelphia. Still live in Philadelphia. Preach in Camden, New Jersey, and seeing things in Camden. Have been in Camden for a long time, in and out with my father, even many years ago, and just seeing certain things. And as time progresses, you see so much, or you tend to see so much that really kind of uh, shows you or builds a picture for you of or a lens, if you will, that you look through. And so, what I'd like to share is just a few thoughts on, as I stated, the Second Amendment, gun control, and or rather, the Second Amendment, gun control in the eye of the Black American. I am a firm believer that as citizens, Black Americans, as citizens, it's our right to have the Second Amendment. We should exhibit or we should take advantage of that right. And there's several reasons I say it. Now, we have a gun control conversation within this country that is outrageous. And some of you already turned off this video, stopped the video, so I'm not listening to another word he's saying. He's probably a Republican. I just can't. I got you. Look here, I'm gonna give you the God honest truth, and I need to give just a little bit more of my background. I don't trust Democrats. And I don't trust Republicans. I did not vote for Donald Trump in the 2020 election. I did not vote for Joe Biden in the 2020 election. I have been an independent for a number of years. I've been independent in my thought, and I really think the best person for the job needs to be elected. And that's my thought. I respect whoever is elected. And I'll be honest, not with Trump, but but I realized I had to limit that. You know what I'm saying? Like I personally, I know how I felt, but I wouldn't disrespect if someone voted for him. Good on you. You voted for him, regardless of race or anything like that. So I'm not politically affiliated, though I know how this video might be interpreted or how it might sound. And I want you to grasp with me that really what I'm talking about is a multifaceted issue that affects people in different places in different ways. First and foremost, I should say that individuals who don't live and don't come from our same background or where we grew up or where we came from don't necessarily and will not necessarily have the same views that we do. It's very easy for someone who does not live in a quote unquote urban center, and they believe, well, this is how it should be, but they don't live here or live in an urban center. But because of what they see on TV or what they see in the media, they believe, well, this is problematic, and I get that, I understand that, and because I understand it is the reason why I said this video is a necessity. Listen, I again say, as citizens in this country, you might not agree with everything in this country. I certainly don't. But as citizens within this country, it is our right to have access to the Second Amendment as well. And what we're beginning to see, and what we've been seeing for a number of years, but one of the things we're beginning to see within this country is a not a clamp down, because there are certain things in place politically that are making it more and more difficult. But we really have to look at certain things plainly. I have never trusted the stereotypical view of a Black man or a Black woman in the news media. And some of us have taken that and ran with it. Now, here's the other unfortunate part. In taking one piece of media and running with whatever is being said, it kind of creates a lens. But when you live in a culture, in an area, in a city, you can look and say, wait a minute, man, nah, that's not how it is at all. Something that I'll be honest, I don't like. In the news, and today is March 29th, 2021, at the time of this recording, But within the past 2 weeks, week and a half, there was an assailant who went and he shot and killed. Uh, well, he actually shot more, but at least 8 people were killed in Asian salons down in Atlanta, Georgia. Another gentleman, Islamic, he went into, and I don't want to castigate all Muslims, but he was an Islamic individual. The first one was a white man, and he went into a supermarket in Boulder, Colorado. It actually started in the parking lot, and he killed about 8 or 10 people in Virginia Beach. Now, the Virginia Beach situation is a little bit tricky because it seems like it's 2 or 3 different incidents that took place at the same time, but it ended up around 8 people being killed. And then in New Northern Liberties, right here in Philadelphia, there was a shootout also on Friday, which would have been the 26th, where it also about 8 people, 7 or 8 people were shot and killed, if I'm not mistaken. But we see these things. These things are amping up. And one of the things we actually see, and there's a reason I said Northern Liberties. I'm going to get there in a moment. But it's quite interesting to me what we see within our society. It's from a governmental perspective, what's being purported is that AR-15s need to be banned. That's what's being purported. AR-15s need to be banned. And they always point to, what is it, Sandy Hook. They point to Parkland, Florida. They point even to Columbine. And they always say AR-15s. And I go back in my mind, I'm like, wait a minute, like, this is interesting. They say AR-15 rifles, and these are weapons of war. And I am one who is of a mindset that dumb stuff, can I call it dumb stuff? Yeah, I can call it dumb stuff because it doesn't make sense. Don't get me wrong. I am for the protection of all children. I am for the protection of all adults. I really am. And I firmly believe as a parent, all of us have the responsibility to protect our children. I went to high school in Philadelphia. I went to the George Washington Carver High School for Engineering and Science. The tagline was the small school with the big name. And we had fences all around us. Probably by my junior year, I remember they installed metal detectors, and there were security personnel all throughout the building on each floor at all times. I remember it just that's what it was. That there were gates on the window, and I remember those things. And I know a lot of people that remember those things that grew up and went to these different high schools and went to these different grade schools, and we saw this stuff. Gun control takes time. You don't have to ask permission or pass legislation to secure these suburban schools where these mass shootings take place. You don't need legislation for that. You can do that at the drop of a dime. You can do that. Notice I said it was my junior year in high school, right before my junior year or in the middle of my sophomore year. I remember in high school, it was boom. Oh, we got metal detectors now. And it's like, word? Okay, we got to scan our book bag. Word? Where did this come from? And students, many of us were upset by this, at least in my class. We were upset by this, like upset that this took place. But they didn't ask my mother permission. They didn't ask any of the students permission. I want to understand, why is it that we keep talking about the safety of kids and we won't secure them like we do in the hood? Is it that Black people cannot be trusted to keep themselves safe, or is it that we're unsafe as it is, and so we need to protect Black and brown children? Is that what it is? Because I to this day still don't understand why it is that it was us. We got that treatment, but Parkland takes place, Sandy Hook takes place, or rather, Sandy Hook took place, and then Parkland took place, and it's like, so nobody thought to do this for those two institutions? Our children are there. You don't have to pass legislation. You don't have to fight over guns. You simply just have to protect them. But they never did. I do remember a CNN on CNN. I must have been at a friend of mine, a preacher in Burlington, New Jersey, was at his house. We're watching the news media, and as we're watching it, the thing that struck he and I were, as we were looking at it, we're like, okay, and they asked a woman, she was like, our kids need to be safe. And the reporter asked the question, he says, well, hey, would you be for like metal detectors and security personnel and gates just to make sure and to ensure that there are several checkpoints to make sure that our children are safe? And the statement she made was, I don't want my child to feel like they're living in or going to school in a prison. But in the urban centers of America, we didn't have a choice. So why are we leaving, or why are we, now mind you, that was a reporter and a parent. Why have no legislators, why haven't legislators proposed that to protect students immediately? Because here's the thing, I don't have to worry about if I need to ban a firearm or not. No, 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 no. As a politician, that'll take forever. We can secure them right now, but we don't. So I'm puzzled because there are no mass shootings in the urban centers of America. There are no mass shootings. You don't hear, and trust me, if there was a mass shooting in an urban city, you would have seen it on the news. But you didn't. But we don't talk about that. Some of us, we move to the burbs, and some of us really, we want a better life. We want an education that's better funded, because let's be real, in some cities, in many cities, they don't get there's so much politicalness involved. It's the children don't get everything that they should get. So we want to move to the suburbs so they live better. We don't necessarily want to see those things, but if you say to a parent, we want to ensure their safety, this gun control debate is going to be a long time. We want to make sure they are safe right now. I don't think a single parent would disagree with that. But we'll see. Perhaps one day a politician will grow a pair, or will grow a vagina, and really, you want to be inclusive, but you perhaps they'll grow strength. Perhaps they'll gain courage enough to say, you know what, I'm going to protect my child. We need to protect our children, and we're not asking any more questions in this regard again. We'll see. Do I believe it will happen? Probably not. But that's just a thought I've always had. Like, why are we waiting for policy when we need to secure the children? I know some of you right now, you might be watching and saying, is he for gun control? If you know me, you know I'm not. And I'm going to share with you why. It is oftentimes amazing to me that when we look at firearms and gun control in regard to firearms, we oftentimes hear about the AR-15 rifle. That's what we hear about. And I'm a fan of the AR-15. I like it. But I've often been shocked at those who are for, well, we need that gun banned. And I remember we used to, at least when CDs, because of the digital age, we kind of have forgotten about numbers. So when Jay-Z says, men lie, women lie, but numbers don't lie, well, a ton of people have said it. But when Jay-Z said it, he's talking about record sale numbers, right? Because literally you had to go and buy a CD, or you had to order the CD. Y'all remember them days. Lord have mercy. I'm not old. Anyway, but we would oftentimes go and say, oh man, how many they sell in their first week? Numbers. And we argued about artists based on album sales. If y'all remember, at some point we did that. Perhaps in the early 2000s, we were doing that. Late 90s, early 2000s, we were doing that. And yet, I don't think a lot of us have looked at the numbers in regard to firearms. Because if we did, what we'd see is most of firearm violence. I'm talking about homicides toward shootings involving other individuals. We experience that in the urban centers of America. And here's the truth. We experience that with handguns. We experience that with handguns. Why? This is a training pistol. It's red, it's rubber. As you can see, there's absolutely no trigger. It's even if there was a thought of one, it was apparently sealed here or broken off here. There's nothing. This is sealed closed, but this does not detach or anything like this. But this is a training pistol, so it has a bit of weight to it. But this type of a pistol, let's be honest, I can hide this, and you will know it fast, and you will know it. Most of the crimes in America are done with handguns. But where are these things done? Unfortunately, they're done all over, but unfortunately, they tend to concentrate around cities, urban centers, if you will. They tend to concentrate around there. It's interesting because what we hear needs to be banned is an AR-15. That's a rifle, if you're unaware. But the biggest culprit of homicides are handguns. Handguns, not rifles. Yet, we hear a lot of talk and a lot about legislation regarding rifles. We hear about rifles. We hear about Charleston. We hear about Sandy Hook. We hear about, my goodness, Parkland. Now we're going to hear about Georgia and Boulder and Virginia Beach and Philly and Northern Liberties. I'm saying it like that for a reason, because if you're in Philly or around Philly, you know where Northern Liberties is. Matter of fact, right, it is adjacent to Fishtown, Brewery Town. All of those there. Northern Liberties, nice place. It's interesting. Gentrified, been improved, whole nine. But it's interesting. You hear about these places, but the places that really suffer from gun violence, the only time you hear about New York City or Chicago is during election years. We don't hear. I prayed this past Sunday, and my prayer, I asked prayers for the victims of the families. I certainly want to pray for them of the shootings that have taken place in Atlanta, in Boulder, in Virginia Beach, in Philly. Excuse me, in Northern Liberties, which is Philly. I don't care what anybody says, but in Philly, we talked about those things. We prayed about those things, but I said it's for those victims. And another thing I said, and we're asking praise for those who are often forgotten about in cities that have this regularly occurring. We don't hear anything about Newark, New Jersey. We don't hear anything about Camden, New Jersey. We don't hear anything about Norfolk, Virginia. We don't hear anything about Charlotte, North Carolina. We don't hear much about Philadelphia, except Northern Liberties. We don't hear anything about New York City, which has the highest gun laws and at the same time has the highest firearm crime. But during election years, oh my goodness, you'll hear those names and oftentimes wonder, why is that? So I did a check, looked at some numbers, and these numbers are, we're gonna between 2 years, but 2019 numbers. There were 39,707 firearm related deaths. In 2019, it was 39,707 deaths by firearm. The numbers, or one number I can honestly say, which always struck me as interesting, is 60% of that number in 2019 were suicides. Now, typically, I'm gonna give you the rough estimate. Every really a gun aficionado or a gun advocate knows that the numbers roughly amount to about 60% each and every year. Why do I say that? In 2018, 61% of gun deaths were suicide. 61% of gun deaths in 2018 were suicide. 60% of deaths were suicide in 2019, 2 years ago. The CDC is still compiling and grafting and getting numbers together for 2020, but it's interesting that these things take place, but 60% of gun deaths are suicide. To give you the numbers broken down in particular, we have, of all deaths, this is the entire United States. I'm going to give you 2018 numbers. I am going to link an article in this video for the 2019 numbers. You can check that out, but I want to go 2 years. There's enough time for correction for error, which is why I'm going back roughly 3 years. But 61% in 2018, 61% of gun deaths were via suicide. 1% was legal intervention. What that meant was more than likely someone in law enforcement that had to shoot someone. So that is considered 1%. That's considered legal intervention. 1% were unintentional. 1% were undetermined. 35% was homicide. Here is a number that may shock you. In 2018, 0.2% were mass shootings. 0.2% were mass shootings. You're never going to believe this, but do you remember the Virginia Tech mass shooting that took place? Truly an unfortunate circumstance. I do remember that clearly, and I remember they said it was an Asian guy who did it. Just evil. And I mean, anyone who does these crimes are evil. I'm not negotiating that fact. You could be like, no. Every last one of them that did it is evil. Every last one that did a mass shooting is evil. Every person that does a mass shooting is evil. But it's interesting. I think they said he injured 35 at Virginia Tech, injured 35 people. Injured or killed 35 people. And the government, no. It would be fair to say that, but politicians went after the AR-15 rifle. He had 2 of these. He didn't have a rifle. He only had 2 of these. Some of you might be remembering, well, he had a rifle. No, he had 2 of these. Some of you go and say, even if you remember Columbine, and I remember Columbine as for me, the first major school shooting ever. It was like, oh my goodness, this was ridiculous to see this. And these youngsters, I believe, if I remember, and I could be messed up on the details and every detail that I'm about to say, but I remember Trenchcoat Mafia is what they were called, and these 2 guys, and they went in and they said, well, and everybody, they had AR-15s. I'm like, no, they had shotguns. Did one of them have an AR-15? I don't remember. I should look it up. So while you and I are right here in a video, I'm going to look it up, and I'm certain you're going to do the same thing to see if what I'm talking about is correct. But it's interesting because I'm like, I remember shotguns were involved, but somehow, some way, in this massacre by these 2 terrorists, these 2 evil individuals, what in the world were they doing? They had shotguns, and they had, if I'm correct, some other weapon, but I don't remember if it was, if it was a what's that word? A AR-15. And the reason I'm doing this in front of you, because I want y'all to see, I'm looking at the same thing y'all looking at. They had 2 9mm firearms and 2 12-gauge shotguns. One had a high point 995 carbine. Some of you don't know what a carbine is. It would look like a rifle, but they had 13 10-round magazines. Why do I say that? Because it's also been brought about. Why would what? There is legislation out there that talks about if you limit the amount of ammunition a person can fire, then you're in better condition. They had 13 10-round magazines. Pump action shotgun. Lord, they had some weapons on them, a double barrel. But they had some interesting things. As a matter of fact, this is the high point carbine. And as a matter of let me see if I can flip this around so y'all can see it. But this is the weapon. This is a carbine, high point carbine. But that's not an AR-15. Now, mind you, it did spark a lot of controversy. That I do remember. It sparked a lot of stuff in regard to, well, we need to have the AR-15 banned. And it seems like it's something that I'm like, wow, this is interesting. Why is this going on so much? It's interesting that every one of these incidents discuss every one of these incidents, these mass shootings, always purport the need to get rid of AR-15s. But most crime is committed with handguns. Most crime is committed with handguns. This is a training pistol once more, but most violent crimes with guns are with handguns. So I say that because are we being goaded to fight for something politically that does not affect our urban centers? A question to think on. Matter of fact, you can answer the question down below in the comments. Are we being goaded to push for legislation that doesn't affect most of us? Now, I did say in 2018 that mass shootings were 0.2%. That means 0.2%. I want to speak to a number that really hit me from 2019. 2019, in the article that I'm tagging below, 2019, this article is shared on the Daily Wire, as a matter of fact. It says that the amount of deaths by AR-15s, in terms of all guns, but AR-15s only accounted for 2.5% of all gun-related deaths. What that does not include, and this is something to keep in mind, is that law enforcement also uses AR-15s. So we don't know if the AR-15s were in home invasions, if they were just sticking people up and hijacking their cars, or if it was used in any type of urban setting or urban environment, or even suburban or rural environment. We don't understand if it's that, but we need to get rid of, and I question why that is. I'd like to plead with you for one thing as I move on and we go ahead to close out this particular series of this particular video. But I believe all of us have a right to our Second Amendment. I certainly believe it. I also believe that because of a misunderstanding, this can go into a much longer video. I'm not going to do that. But because of a misunderstanding, the phrase defund the police, the phrase defund the police is a marketing ploy. What it actually means is demilitarize the police. So by defunding, what they mean is reduce the budget so that they're not over militarized. Here's the issue. Here's the big issue. There are some who took it to mean abolish the police. And at the same time, there are some who supported defund the police because they thought it meant abolish the police and they really wanted to abolish the police. As a result of that, what we saw in 2020, especially after, and this movement really started to pick up steam, especially after the murder of George Floyd, what we saw were individuals that didn't want to be police anymore. I have several friends that are in the police department here in Philly, several friends that are in law enforcement all over the country in different parts. And some, well, I should say this. What I've heard from those in Philly have said they have had since last year a large amount of people quitting and retiring. A large amount of people quitting and retiring. At the same time, there probably will not be a graduating class from the Philadelphia Police Academy. This is happening in urban centers. Maybe not as much in suburban and rural environments, but this is happening in urban centers all over the nation. We have less police. We have a high handgun issue. Forgive me, a high violence by handgun issue in urban centers, and we have less police to deal with it. The response time is down. And then there's also one other aspect. We have individuals that now in today's society, when they go to do anything, what they typically do is that no one does anything by themselves anymore. What you mean by that, Ken? What I mean is you have some people that when they go to do a home invasion, they're not doing it by themselves. They're doing it with a team. When they go to do a carjacking, they're not doing it by themselves. Someone wants to break in and rob you, they're not going in by themselves. They're going in more than one. It's taking longer for police to respond. We have emotionally high individuals that are robbing and hurting and killing people. And yet we have policymakers on both sides of the aisle in the major party system that believe that we need to get rid of guns. I am a firm believer that every American, especially if you're a Black American living in an urban environment, living in the hood, living near the hood, you have that right to protect yourself. You really are your first responder. That means it's going to take not. That means it's not just going to be about oh well we want to no, it's not just about getting a gun, it's about training with that weapon as well, because it's necessary. There are a lot of people who don't agree with me, but none of them are politicians, because they want to ban something that won't save you. You don't have to listen to me, you don't have to believe me when I say it, but I will say this. Why is it that the only time any urban center like Chicago is discussed is during elections? Why is it that we're grossly affected in urban centers more than any other area of the country with gun violence? Why is it that police officers are retiring or quitting in the urban centers of America where Black and brown people live? And what we're saying now, what these politicians believe, is that we ought to give up our guns. Why? If I have to 911, door gets kicked in, and someone has a firearm, we're living in the day and age where life is not valued. So do I leave it? I'm going to dial 911. I had a conversation with a loved one of mine, and he said I can do enough to stop them until the police get there. I'm not waiting 9 minutes. I got enough to stop them too. And I can't wait. Why? Because if you get to my wife or my son, that's enough to stop me from doing anything. And because we're living in a society where people devalue life, no one devalues life. Why do we have so many shootings? Then perhaps I need to protect me, my family, and my household. You can look up a lot of these numbers. I'm going to put links to those things that I have researched and gained information from and insight, and I'm going to link those in the bottom. Listen, as a standard, what folks say with everybody, please like to share it with somebody. Let's talk. We don't have to agree, but we can talk peacefully. But numbers don't lie. And we are literally in the fight for our lives. So I encourage you, get a weapon, learn how to use that weapon. That means don't buy. I got a friend of mine who bought a weapon 2 years ago, and she's like, I need to train with it. And it's like, word? Like, oh, when the last time you, I never shot it. Another guy I knew, a guy I knew from back when, he said the same thing. He's like, oh, well, I have this. And it's like, okay. And they're like, yeah, I never shot it. Last thing I say, and then I'm going to hop off this thing. Shooting a gun is not like the movies. At all. It's not like the movies. Oh, it's not. No. Yeah, and I could. That's why a lot of people, you can look them. If you look up gun, if you look up hashtag gun range fails, some people are surprised. Some people have no idea, and you'll see it and you'll hear it when you're at the range. And it's one of those things. It's like, look, this is not the movies. Because in the movies, it's cool. Jean-Claude Van Damme was just watching Hard Target. Yeah. Gotta go watch the 90s movies. The gun flies. It's a Beretta too, just like this training pistol. It's nothing in there, no trigger. But just like this training pistol, it's a Beretta, and it landed in his hand, and all of a sudden he looked, and he was able to aim, and boom, and was able to shoot somebody right here in the eye. Oh, it was so smooth. That doesn't happen in real life at all. Even when you're just shooting a target. You got to train with these things, and you have to know how to handle them. Because if you don't, that's how accidents happen. That's one reason accidents happen. Look, God bless you. God keep you. Let's talk. Holler at me in the comments. Let's talk about this. You might have a different view. And I can understand that. And we can talk about that. Why do you have that different view? Why do you think that way? Okay, what is there a way we can come together? And even if we end up not agreeing, we still can leave this conversation cool with one another. So God bless you. God keep you. Lord willing, I catch you at the next video.